Hey everyone, it's weird to be recording a debate video right now, but here I am. This is a difficult time. I hope everyone is doing well as can be expected in such a difficult time. It feels a little bit insensitive at this moment to focus on the competition part of debate too much, but I recognize that debate is a really important part of many of your lives, and certainly in my life. So I'm going to be recording some new videos and posting them to my channel in the coming weeks and months, and I hope that all the students of debate out there might find them helpful, not only now, but long into the future after hopefully this pandemic ends. This first video I wanted to record is not one that's going to help anyone win any debates, but I am hopeful that it can make you and maybe others feel a little bit better during this very trying time. So last month I saw a post by Philippe Schultz on the Duck of Minerva blog called Practicing Academic Kindness in the Classroom. And it's a relatively short piece, but I really appreciated it, and I saved it to revisit at the end of the season, at the debate season. But obviously the end of the debate season came a lot sooner than I had expected, and I decided that it was a pretty good time to share this idea with everyone. I had initially planned on just sharing this with my own team, but I thought this would make a good video, and I thought this would be the perfect first video to record as I start adding some more content to my channel. So I hope that this will be a useful resource right now, and then hopefully for many years to come. But it did seem particularly impactful in the current moment. So practicing academic kindness, what does Schultz mean? Well, Schultz is a postdoctoral researcher at a German university. And his point is, in short, that academic communities are very competitive. They've become more competitive. And in that competitive environment, expressing gratitude and appreciation for your colleagues is relatively uncommon, or at least more uncommon than it should be. So Schultz describes one technique that he's been using to try to counteract that tendency and to try to promote more kindness in his academic community. He says, quote, "Together with my students for each session in our seminars, we write an email to the authors we read that day to share our appreciation for their work. The idea came to me when a scholar whose work I absolutely admire in an email also mentioned that she had assigned one of my recently published articles in one of her seminars and that the students liked the text. For me, this was the first time I heard that someone had used any of my writing in class, let alone that it was apparently well received, and so this was an absolute highlight for me that semester." Schultz describes the process that he uses. Quote, "How does this look in practice? After discussing the weekly readings towards the end of the seminar, we take about 10 minutes for us as a class to collectively articulate what we liked about the text, what we most benefited from, and what most surprised us. As the students voice their feedback, I take note of their comments and afterwards draft it up into an email, which we then send to the authors, signed off collectively as class. In these emails, we also let the recipients know how their readings helped us to answer our respective seminar questions, as well as what other readings we engaged in alongside their work." Schultz kind of goes into more detail. You can read the whole article. It's not very long. But in his experience, he says the reaction to these messages has been extremely positive. He says, quote, "Responses from authors highlight that reading our feedback made their day, even their month, and that our practice is generous, helpful, and much appreciated. Many have in return articulated wonderfully encouraging comments directed to the students and thereby accepted our invitation to practice kindness amongst ourselves." And I thought about this, and I've had some similar experiences, and I think that Schultz's theory about why these emails have such a big impact is correct. His theory is, quote, "We all get so used to receiving and articulating critique, mostly constructive, but often also harsh, unreasonable, and imbalanced about our work and papers, whether at conferences, during peer review, or from supervisors and or peers. But in my experience so far, we too seldom just articulate positive, affirmative, encouraging, and generous feedback about something we truly enjoyed reading and from which we benefited intellectually, politically, or even personally." When I read Schultz's article, I immediately saw the connections between the scholarly community he was describing and the scholarly community of academic debate or competitive debate. I think probably to an even greater degree than in the college departments and in the college setting that Schultz is describing, debate is a community that is not only based on, but really obsessed with competition. And at its best, that emphasis on competition is its own form of kindness. To compete against somebody is to express a respect and an appreciation for them, for their perspectives. But many of us mostly or totally leave that connection between competition and appreciation unstated. And that can leave our colleagues, whether those are our opponents or our the judges that judge us, the coaches of our other teams, the hosts of our tournaments, wondering whether we really do, in fact, appreciate and respect them. And also, like the college classes that Schultz describes, debate tends to leave unacknowledged and unexpressed its appreciation for the authors whose work we study and cite throughout our debate seasons. Debate is parasitic on the labor of a whole host of authors, professors, policy analysts, journalists, philosophers, others, who we cite their work as evidence. But while parasitic has a bad connotation, I don't mean it in a negative way. Parasitic comes from the Latin for one who eats at the table of another. And debate, as an academic community, certainly eats at many other tables. It eats at the academic table, so many other academic tables. But for the most part, we don't show much appreciation for those with whom we dine. And so in this moment more than ever, I think we should try to be better about both of those things. And as the Frank Turner song, which I love, says, to try to be more kind, my friends, try to be more kind. So how can debaters better express academic kindness? I think individually or with teammates, to the extent that it is possible, debaters should consider copying and applying Schultz's idea to their community. And I think especially in this time of social distancing, sending a few of these emails that express gratitude to others can do a lot to bring more kindness into an otherwise very scary and distanced world. When you're crafting these emails, I think you should remember Schultz's recommendation about the tone or the tenor of the emails. They should be positive, affirmative, encouraging, and generous. You should be specific about what you appreciated and why. These messages don't need to be long to have a big impact. If they are genuine and honest expressions of gratitude, a simple paragraph can almost certainly suffice. I've been thinking about this, and I suggest 5 audiences for debaters to target with these emails. First, authors whose work you've cited as evidence. Second, opponents who you've been grateful to debate against. Third, judges whose feedback you've appreciated. Fourth, tournament hosts whose events you've enjoyed attending. And fifth, teammates and coaches who you've relished competing with. So I'm going to go through each of these one by one and kind of explain what I mean and maybe give you a few suggestions about how to do it effectively. So the first group of people who I think debaters can show more academic kindness toward are the authors whose work you've cited as evidence. As I said before, debate relies on the intellectual labor of so many others for a great deal of its argumentation, really for the game that we play. Debaters certainly do a whole lot of intellectual labor themselves, but it's founded on and ultimately tethered to the work of so many others. For the most part, the authors that debaters read tend not to be very popular with high school students, and that's certainly an understatement. Most of the people that you cite, the professors, the policy analysts, the journalists, they would be blown away to find out that hundreds or thousands of high school students have spent so much time not just reading their articles, not just reading what they've written, but taking those ideas seriously and debating about them and analyzing them, synthesizing them with the work of others, and really thinking deeply about their ideas and their arguments. In my experience, thanking authors for their work, and even just more than thanking them, just letting them know that students are reading it and that they're taking it seriously and that they're not just writing into the ether and then no one is paying attention. Just doing that can elicit an extremely positive response. So what I would suggest is that you go through your files, especially the ones that you relied on the most, like your 1AC or the 1NCs that you tended to go for the most, and identify those authors whose work you appreciated and learned from the most. The people whose work you enjoyed reading, the people whose arguments you found persuasive, the people whose academic publications you tended to gravitate toward as you were going through your studying of the topic for that year, whatever the argument was, and the ones that you liked, the ones that you appreciated, the ones that had a positive impact on you in whatever way that they did. When you locate a few of those, it's pretty easy to find the email addresses of those authors. It's usually included in the article if it's a journalist or most authors on web publications. If it's not included in the article, you can almost always find it on the author's personal website or the professional website or their social media. So track down their email. When you're writing, if you're not sure whether authors have any experience with competitive debate, some do, but most don't, it can help to briefly explain what debate is. When I've sent these emails in the past, I've included some context about debate. I've included sometimes some representative examples of cards or even speech documents that draw upon the author's work, or kind of contextualize it within the arguments that debaters have been having. I've included descriptions of how debates involving their arguments or their evidence have played out. Occasionally, I've even sent videos of students debating their arguments and their evidence. In particular, I think if you were persuaded by an author's argument, if you think that they were right about whatever it is that they were arguing about, you should consider telling them that. And if you had success winning debates with their argument, I think you should say so and say how their argument tended to defeat the most common counter-arguments. But more than anything, just let the author know that you appreciated their work, you took their work seriously, you learned from it, it meant something to you, you feel like they made a contribution to your learning and to your personal academic development, maybe even just your personal development as a person by reading their work and by learning something about it. I think this can make a huge difference. And I think in this time when so many professors and policy analysts and journalists are feeling precarious and disconnected, getting one of these emails could be a big deal. Second category, opponents who you've been grateful to debate against. This is something that kind of happens in person at end of year tournaments often. But sadly this year that's not going to be happening, at least not in an in-person way. These can be difficult messages to send. To some, it's very uncool to thank an opponent or to express your gratitude for the debates that you've had against someone. To others, these kinds of emails are just too difficult. They show too much vulnerability. I understand that, but I think that's also why they have such a significant impact on the recipient, because we all kind of know that these are tough to write. You kind of have to put yourself out there to say thank you to an opponent. The best example of this is a famous email, I think it's still famous, that Ross Smith, who was the coach at Wake Forest University, sent to the college email listserv after his team won the national debate tournament. Many of you are likely familiar with this. I think you've probably seen this before, but I bet a lot of you haven't. So I'll quote it here. I'll read the whole thing for those that are not. Wake Forest had won the national debate tournament, and Ross Smith sent this email to the listserv to all of his colleagues. Thank you, competitors. Every one of you, coach and debater, who face our teams and push our teams to think harder, research deeper, get outside of our narrower confines. You pose questions to our coaching, without which questions we cannot learn and improve. On occasion, hopefully rare, we do not reciprocate or we fail to appreciate. When we, being human, are at our worst, we might denigrate. I hope and trust not, but know that we mean not. We can't do it without you. What are the best debates you have judged or debated in? They are closely contested. They reflect a commitment to excellence. That attribute can never be one-sided. We are at our worst and best when we put everything we have into a debate and come up on the short end. But who gave us the opportunity to be triumphant and feel that the win was meaningful in the first place? Our competitors. Thank you. Ross Smith. When you're deciding who you want to send these emails to, you can, of course, choose friends that you've known well over the course of your years in debate. But I would also consider teams that you don't know well or don't even really know at all beyond debating them. Or even teams, and this would be the hardest email to send, that you have a rivalry with, or even teams that you kind of didn't get along with during the year, but who you appreciated debating. When explaining why you appreciated debating a team, you can identify a single debate. So you could write an email saying, I really appreciated this debate we had at this tournament. Or you could talk about the series of debates that you had during the season. I really appreciated debating you throughout the season. We debated 5 times. I really appreciated that we got to do that. Try to be specific about what you appreciated about the opponent, whether it was their demeanor, whether it was their arguments, whether it was how much they challenged you, whether it was how much you learned from researching to beat their arguments, or from getting the feedback and then trying again and going back to the drawing boards, or whatever it was. Just say thank you. And these don't need to be particularly long. They could be, but they could also be quite short. And I think in this moment when so many students had their debate seasons and unfortunately for seniors had their debate careers end before they knew that they were ending, this can be very meaningful. Just to know that one of the debates that you had, or one of the sets of debates that you had this year, meant something to an opponent, that an opponent appreciated getting the chance to debate against you, or that they really learned from the experience, or that they really look back fondly on the debates that you had. Maybe it was someone else's favorite debate was against you, or maybe someone thought that you were their favorite team to debate against during the year, something like that. And you can also send this to, especially if you're a younger student, to older students who you got to watch debate. So you can just say, I really appreciated getting a chance to watch you, maybe in an elimination round, or maybe in a video that was posted on YouTube or whatever. Just say, it meant something to me. I learned a lot from you, and I, in particular, I really like this and this, but I really appreciate the fact that I got to watch you debate. It meant something to me. I think sending those types of emails is hard. You have to put yourself out there, but I think it can be very meaningful. Third category, judges whose feedback you've appreciated. This is another suggestion I think many will find awkward or uncomfortable. It can feel like pandering, or sort of in the, to use a school jargon, grade grubbing or whatever, but it doesn't need to. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, I think you can use the early end of the debate season and kind of the trauma of social distancing during this pandemic to give you a built-in excuse. So when framing your email, you can kind of just say, I felt I didn't get the closure I normally would at my final tournament, but I wanted to make sure that you knew how much I appreciated you. I wanted you to know how much your judging meant to me. And I wanted to just say thank you, knowing that we're not going to get that last chance to interact. And maybe you weren't even going to be able to say thank you in person at the final tournament, but you can do so now, and doing so now I think can make a big difference. These emails can be very short. Just tell the person you appreciated getting the chance to debate in front of them. Tell them you appreciated their attention and their feedback and their suggestions. Just say thank you. You can say more, of course, but even a brief email can have a big impact on the recipient. And I think especially in this moment when so many of your judges are really missing debate, and they're missing that chance to have that normalcy of just going to debate tournaments and judging debates. Number 4, tournament hosts whose events you've enjoyed attending. This is one that I think is hard for many debaters, especially debaters who attend schools who don't themselves host an invitational tournament. It can be hard to understand how much effort goes into hosting debate tournaments. They can start to seem like they're just entitlements that we take for granted. I know when the debate tournament started to first get canceled because of the social distancing provisions in the coronavirus pandemic, the initial reaction that many people had, naturally, understandably, was to be really upset and feel like they had something taken away from them, and that how dare these tournaments cancel? I worked so hard for this. I deserve to get to go to this tournament, and I understand that sentiment. Obviously, we learned after that the stakes were much higher than we probably mostly understood at the time, and everything has been canceled at this point. But my narrower point is that in a normal year, most students would go through the whole year kind of just thinking that tournaments exist. They happen. They're always there, and you just go to them. But I think in this moment, now that we've had so many tournaments get canceled, especially end of year tournaments, it's dawning on students, I assume, and even longtime coaches like myself, how much appreciation we really have for tournaments. Sometimes having something taken away is the only way to really understand how much you appreciate it. And telling a few of the hosts of the tournaments that you did get to attend during the course of your season how much you appreciated that should be relatively easy to find the contact emails for the directors of tournaments you've attended. Just go to Tab Room. The contact information is almost always in the invitation or on the main page or listed along the right side. If you can't find it, your coach or sponsor, whoever registers you for tournament, should be able to help you find it. But this, again, can be a relatively short email. It can just say, I've been reflecting on my season, or I've been reflecting on my debate career, and I just wanted to say thank you for hosting such an excellent tournament. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciated all the labor that I know went into hosting it, or I don't even really know how much labor went into it, but I really appreciate it, and I just wanted to let you know that. And if you can include a couple specific things, about what you really appreciated, whether it was the judging or the hospitality or some small thing that that tournament host did to make your experience at their tournament a little bit better, just say so. because that's something that can be very meaningful to the recipient. And I think it is important for students to learn to actively appreciate the labor that goes into hosting these tournaments. Now that it's been revealed how precarious the kind of idea of debate tournaments, in-person debate tournaments are, and in-person debate tournament hosting is, I think it's a wake-up call that we need to be even more appreciative for those who have put in the labor to host these tournaments over the years. Fifth and final category, teammates and coaches who you've relished competing with. I went back and forth, to be honest, about whether to include this category. It doesn't completely fit Schultz's example. Thanking your teammates and coaches would be more like thanking your classmates, and that's not really Schultz's point. But I decided ultimately to include it because in these difficult times, and especially with so many seasons cut short, careers cut short, and with schools closed or operating just remotely, some of the normal end-of-year opportunities for appreciation just aren't going to exist. You might not get to see your teammates again and your coaches again in person for several months, and that's really sad. You might not have your end-of-year banquet or your end-of-year gathering or your end-of-year party or whatever it is that your squad does to just sort of celebrate the end of the year. Even if you don't do any of that, you just won't have that last tournament that you know is your last tournament. A lot of teams maybe go out for dinner or just kind of have an in-person talk just after that last tournament, maybe on the last night, maybe the first night at the last tournament. You have some kind of ritual. None of that's going to happen, and that's sad. And I think that that's why I ultimately decided to include this, because I think there are some things that you can do with just a short email that can make a huge difference and kind of start to bridge some of that gap that's been left. If you're still in school, or maybe you still do have a tournament left, an online tournament, you might want to save this for later and do this at the end after the season is over. But at some point before the end of the school year, I think you should try to send a few emails to your teammates and to your coaches and just say thank you and say how much you appreciate them. As a coach, I know how much these emails can mean. It's often hard to know even what to say in response. Sometimes I struggle to respond to them, but they are incredibly meaningful to receive, and I often will look back on some of these that I've gotten when I'm having a difficult moment or when I'm questioning, my profession or myself or whatever. And I think I've also seen how much impact this kind of thing can have on a teammate, especially in this moment when so many of you are feeling distanced and just feeling disconnected from your team and just sort of wondering what's going on, and everything is different and everything just feels so bad. I don't think we can underestimate how impactful a small act of kindness like that can be. If you're an older student sending to a younger student, if you're a younger student sending to an older student, or if you're an older student sending to another older student, whether it's your partner or another team, another teammate, just saying thank you, acknowledging that this isn't the way that you had hoped that the season would end or that your debate career would end, high school debate career, but that nonetheless, these are things that you look back on fondly. I think going through that process of thinking about that and crafting that email can be very meaningful to you. And I think receiving that kind of email from someone else can be very meaningful for the recipient. So to conclude, I don't think anything I've said here is groundbreaking. I don't think this is anything fancy or cutting edge or whatever. Gratitude has been an in thing for a few years. The kind of commercialization or corporatization of gratitude and the gratitude branding, I often find kind of disgusting. But that's not what Schultz is really talking about, and that's not what I'm encouraging you to do here. I think that expressing academic kindness is more than just being grateful or appreciative. I think it's specifically appreciating the labor of others, and it's doing so by showing the person who produced that labor how much the product of their labor has benefited you. And that form of academic kindness in this moment, but in any moment, I think can be extremely meaningful. And so as you are thinking about ways to close out your season and your year, and you're reflecting on the debate season that was cut unexpectedly short, sadly, and as you're reflecting on the things that you're missing during this time of social distancing and quarantine, I encourage you to think about this. I am grateful to Philip Schultz for posting this on the Duck of Minerva blog. I'm grateful for the Duck of Minerva blog publishing it and for all of the great work that they publish. And I hope that you appreciated this encouragement. So be more kind, my friends. Try to be more kind.